Hello to everybody, my name is Stefano and welcome to this episode of the Think and Analyze podcast. So, today we're going to try to answer the question, who do you think you and others are? Now, before we begin, I just want to say that during this episode you might find some references to other two episodes that I already did in the past, which are how do people judge our actions, and the other is the one about the self-fulfilling prophecy. Just so you know that if you if during this episode you think you are hearing something you already know or you have already heard, then that's probably true. Now let's hop into the topic. What do I mean with who do you think you and others are? Well, basically we have in our head kind of an image about ourselves that we believe is true. And we also have the same image for other people as well. But for the sake of this video, I'm just going to discuss the image we have about ourselves. And this image regards basically our personality, our peculiarities, our characteristics, our self. And this is basically generally what we think is true about ourselves. Okay, we can summarize with this sentence. That being said, you also have to know that we tend to act coherently to this image. And so, for example, if we believe that we are, if I believe that I am a hardworking person, then it's highly likely that I'm going to act as an hardworking person. If I believe that I am very emotional, then it's highly likely that during, for example, an argument or other situations, I will get quite emotional, whereas other people are neutral to what they are uh, seeing, to what they are involved in. Other examples, well, I guess you can say that if I believe that I am very good at school, or we could say if I believe that I am a very good student, then it's highly likely that I'm going to study a lot, or at least sufficiently in order to get good grades. Okay, so you kind of know, you kind of understand where I'm going. And I also want to say that it's not that we consciously choose to act coherently to the image we have about ourselves. That is to say that it's not that I believe I am hardworking and so I consciously say or think to myself, okay, since I believe that I am a hardworking person, then I need to act as an hardworking person. It's not like that. We simply act, okay? And so, for this reason, some people might say that's the proof that actually we do not act coherently with a kind of image. We do not act coherently to an image of ourselves. It's not like that, we simply act. But if you think about it, you are not going to radically change your behavior in a matter of days. So, for example, if I always treat my friends as very well, if I always treat them kindly, it's not that after one day I'm going to start to treat them poorly. Instead I will act coherent to what I think is true about myself, and so I will keep treating them well, okay? Because I know that if I start to act differently, then something might be off, and other people might ask themselves, "What is he doing?" Okay. Um, Another example might be the good student who is good at school. I use this example maybe just because I think it may be more familiar to a lot of you, but generally I guess that it is very clear as an example. And so, for example, a very good student, since they know or they believe that they are very good students, is going to study a lot. And if he can't study, he will be feeling a little bit weird because he will know that he is not acting as a normal, we could say. Uh, and most of all, if he most of all, he is not going to consciously choose not to study. Okay, because in that case, something will be off as well, basically. So we tend to act coherently, um, or at least, okay, somebody might say that we at least we can all agree on the fact that maybe not everybody acts coherently to the image about themselves, but we can all agree that we kind of act coherently to our um, previous actions, basically. And so, from that, I believe that it's kind of justifiable to say that we kind of have an image about ourselves. That being said, what happens if we don't act coherently to our image, to the image about ourselves? Well, basically, cognitive dissonance arises, we can say. Now, I just want to use this expression, cognitive dissonance, just because I want to enrich, I guess that is a existing word, this kind of register of this episode, and somebody might find it interesting. But generally speaking, cognitive dissonance, we could say that it is merely a state of uneasiness due to the fact that something is not coherent with our previous actions, basically. Or generally, I mean, it is a state of uneasiness. Okay, that many times can be due to uh, an action that was not coherent to other previous actions. Now, I kind of made this introduction because once you know that you kind of have an image about yourself, and you tend to act coherent to that self, and you also tend to feel coherent to that image, then you realize that basically we are subject to the reality we create. If we believe something, then we are going to act and feel according to that something. So, okay, and so and also of course, also the interactions with other people will be shaped through the idea uh, about ourselves that we believe is true. Okay, not just our actions and our way of thinking, but interactions as well. And so, as I said, we are subject to the reality we create. And so, you realize that people can change. Because I believe that many times you hear people, at least I've heard in my life, quite a lot of times, people saying, "Oh, I am like this, so am not able to do this specific thing. I am X, and so I cannot act like an X. Sorry, I am X, and so I cannot act like a Y person." You kind of hear these things, but if you understand what we just said, you understand that actually people can change. Basically, if they think they are, um, if they think something about themselves, that is, and they cannot sort of fix a specific problem, it may be, not necessarily, but it may be that they kind of have a wrong image about themselves. And if they change that, then probably they will fix their problems. Now, of course, this is not uh, true for every problem. I'm not saying that at all, but sometimes it can be true. Now, now that we know that we can change, we need to know how to change, basically. And for this in order to understand how to change, we are going to introduce two concepts, which are the concept of attitude and the concept of behavior. Now, I honestly believe that the concept of behavior is quite self-explanatory, or at least everybody should know that. But basically, behavior is what we actually act, and then attitude, we can define it. I found this definition. Well, it's not that I found. I have studied this specific definition from Myers. Um, I know that there are also other definitions, because these definitions are kind of tricky to be. They are not going to be perfect, exact, 100%. But I'm just going to tell you this definition just so you have an idea of what we are talking about. And Myers defines a definition. Sorry, Myers defines an attitude as a favorable or unfavorable evaluative reaction towards something or someone, exhibited in one's beliefs, feelings, or intended behavior. So basically, it is a favorable or unfavorable evaluative reaction toward something. Okay, and the key word now are evaluative reaction. It's not an action, it's a evaluation that we do in our head. Okay, because of course we tend to act coherently, but there are many cases in which people do not act coherently, and so they have an attitude, but their behavior signifies something totally different. So generally speaking, so that was to tell you that attitude do not imply actions. Attitude is just we could say a mental state, generally, just more or less. I mean. Now, why did I introduce these two topics? Well, basically because if we want to change, we want to know that attitudes change our behavior. So, for example, if we believe that we are not cool, people will not perceive us as cool. Or even better, we can say that if we believe we are not cool, then we are not going to act cool, and then as a consequence people will not perceive us as cool, because actually we will not be cool. Instead, if we start to think that we are actually fun to be around, we'll be actually fun to be around. And I want to point out that this is not just a matter of perception. It's not that attitude, changing your attitude is just something that goes on in your head and doesn't actually transfer to reality. It actually does. And so you cannot really point out what is changing in reality, because there are a number, infinite, indefinite number of factors. But your attitude totally influences your way of acting, that is your behavior. And so attitudes change your behavior. That is very, very important to know, because if you understand that you have a kind of a tendency to believe something, you know that you may have a behavior that is not very genuine, and you may realize that that behavior is the exact consequence of that specific attitude, and so you need to change that. So for example, and this comes from my experience, so I'm going to share with you my personal experience. If you think that you don't have the right to talk about things that come to your to your to your mind, and so you have this attitude, then your behavior will be affected, and so you will not talk basically about yourself. Okay, and as a consequence, people will see that you don't talk about yourself, and it's almost natural that they will start to believe that maybe you don't have actually nothing to talk about yourself, and so you may be considered as boring, as a boring person. At least that is what I think other people thought of me. But with time, I understood that actually, if something comes to my mind, I'm going to say it. Now, of course, I'm not going to say everything, just because some things do not need and do not must not be said in public, of course. But generally, once I started to have a different attitude about what I thought, and I started to have this attitude of what I think, what comes to my mind is worth saying, because it might be um, very positive to other people. It might bring some joy to the interaction. It might be something interesting to talk about during an interaction. Once I started to have that attitude, then my behavior changed and I became much more confident in myself. And I guarantee you, I perceive, and that is what is important. It's not reality. We are not going to talk about reality. It's what we perceive. I perceive the people as much more, um, we could say, mm, willing to talk to me once I started to believe that what I say and what I think is worth saying. Okay, so that was one example. But the other aspect, which I still haven't talked about, um, and and is what I'm going to talk about right now, is that not only attitudes change our behavior, but our behavior changes our attitudes as well. And that is really interesting, in my opinion, because I believe that sometimes problems or situations cannot be changed that just, well, we could say cannot be changed starting from a change of attitudes. I believe that sometimes we first need to act in a certain way in order to change ourselves. And so we need to change our behavior in order to change our attitude. So, for example, I don't know if this is kind of a very, we could say, superficial example, but I thought that it was kind of explanatory in order to understand, to have a better understanding of what we are saying. For example, if we consciously act very kindly, we'll start to consider ourselves as kind people, of course, because we'll see that, I mean, it's also kind of logical. If you consciously act kindly, then there's no reason to believe that you are not kind. Instead, there is, sorry, a number of reasons to think that you are kind. In the first place, because you act kindly, okay? And so you, with that change of behavior, your attitude might change as well. And also another example, this might be a little bit more deep. Um, if we acquire a role, a position, or generally a job in which we need to be very responsible, we'll actually start to become more responsible, not just in that field, not just because of that role, but also outside of that role. Okay. And about this example, I remember that I've always done well. For 4 years, I was the president of my class in high school, and I believe in the fourth or fifth year, I can actually remember. I remember that one of my teachers, once they came to know that I was uh, elected, uh, well, that I became another time president of my class, this teacher was kind of, I don't know, I don't want to say upset, but we could say a little upset. And at first, like right in the moment, I didn't understand why. But after some time, I realized that what they mean was that if I didn't candidate for class president, then eventually somebody else would have been the class president. And so, as a consequence, since I was already responsible, it was much more useful for other people to become class president in order to become more responsible. So you understand that behaviors change our attitudes as well. And also, generally speaking, I mean, if you if you have an attitude, if you genuinely think that you are not able to do something, it's not that you will start to do it just by starting to think that you can do it. Because if you have never done something, it's, in my opinion, quite difficult um, to think that you can do it. I mean, there are exceptions to that, but you get what I mean. It is instead much more easy. Sorry, it is instead much easier to do that thing, no, regardless of whether you think you can do it or not. And then once you do it, you realize that you can do it. And even if you don't do it perfectly, you realize that you can actually improve and become more skilled at doing that specific thing. And that is another example of behavior changing and attitudes. Now, um, this was basically to say that some parts of the reality we believe, some parts of the reality that we believe are fixed can actually be changed. And you always want to know that. Now, I'm just a little bit in a hurry, so I'm going to end this episode right here, but I didn't have anything to say actually, anything prepared to say. Maybe if I was a little bit more relaxed, I could have said something else, but we have a solid 20 minutes podcast, so I think that we can end it here. So, with that said, see you guys.